Hello everybody, welcome to this week's live stream. If you're new to these, I normally do them every Friday and do them at 2:30 my time here in the UK, and just take a look at what's going on in markets. First of all, we'll have a look at some of the major announcements to watch out for next week. Then we'll jump onto the charts, have a look at the major stuff, indices, gold, oil, some currencies, all of that. And then if there's any stuff you want looking at, if you put it in the chat, once I've looked at the usual, I'll go back and take a look at some of those. We had the payrolls that came out about an hour ago now, isn't it? And I think it was slightly ahead of expectations, so far at least. Stock markets, this is the NASDAQ. We saw the NASDAQ, if we flip this over to maybe a 10-minute chart, you can see where the number came out. So the NASDAQ was trading around 15,540 in the out of hours market, and it's jumped about 70-80 points on that payrolls number. Similar positive move in the S&P, but as usual we'll look at these things in a bit more detail. Before we get into it, let's just get some of the housekeeping done. Let's do a risk warning. This presentation is only for educational purposes. It does not contain and should not be construed as containing investment advice or an investment recommendation or an offer of or solicitation for a transaction in any financial instrument. David Jones accepts no responsibility for any use that may be made of these comments and for any consequences that result. You should consider whether you understand how spread bets, CFDs, futures, foreign exchange work, and whether you can afford to take the high risk of losing your money. Trading is risky. Okay, let's go through some stuff. So next week, lots of fairly important announcements next week. No massive ones, I think, but still interesting. So on Tuesday, we've got Australia interest rate decision. Clearly, interest rates still very much in focus around the world because of the inflation situation, although we are seeing inflation continuing to edge back. We've got US GDP on Tuesday. How well or not is the US economy doing? That could be an interesting one, I think. On Wednesday, we've got US services PMI. So Purchasing Manager Index, again, an insight to the state of the economy. And then on Thursday next week, European GDP. That might be interesting, just to see how the Eurozone economy is doing, what sort of growth, if any, we're getting there. So that's the mix of things to watch out for next week. So I think perhaps a bit of a quieter week than this week, but still a few bits from Tuesday onwards in terms of announcements. A quick plug, as usual, from me, the sponsor. I do a trading course. There are two parts to the course. There's a medium-term trading where I hold trades for weeks and months. I talk about the approaches I use there. 11 video lessons on that. There's a shorter-term trading course that I launched in November last year. 7 video lessons on that. There are live webinars every month run by me. And there's a WhatsApp group as well that gets updated by me every day. The markets I'm looking at, the trades I'm in, and any questions. So that WhatsApp group has been running for about 6 months. So always, I think, reasonably active during the day. I did this public trading thing from November last year. If you go back and view some of the YouTube videos on the channel from the end of last year, you'll see it as I was going along. Because I think most people, when it comes to trading courses, don't talk about the results. The easiest way of demonstrating if you know what you're doing is to show the results. I showed the results all the way through from November to January. It ended up in January. It did much better than I thought it would. I was confident I would make money over the 3-month period, but I traded it using the approaches I talk about in the short-term course. It started off with a £4,000 account, and it booked profits, closed profits, just under £2,200. So much bigger return than I thought. And of course, I've got to say, past performance is no guarantee of future performance, but it worked really well. That's that. I did the same thing again from May to July this year. Talked about it again in various videos, June, July. That was the result. It was a £5,000 account. Booked profits were 3,116. You can see it highlighted there. Some other bits and pieces. My win rate was 58%, which is pretty typical for me. 58% of trades made money. I said a bit in that it's been a losing month for me this month, August. or up to yesterday was August, obviously. So not every month is a winner. I did have 3 winning months: May, June, July, and April was a winner as well. The last losing month I had was in February of this year. I normally have 3 losing months a year, so there's probably another loser coming before the end of the year. But anyway, that was the results from May to July. £5,000 account, £3,116 book profit, which is a 62% return. And what makes the difference is big winning trades. I've got a trade running at the moment, for example, that I did last Friday on the NASDAQ. And at the moment, I think it's made about 2.5 times my risk. So for me, in a month, it's maybe 1 or 2 trades that really make the difference in a month. But, I show these numbers, not to say, well, hey, look at me, aren't I fantastic? But to show, that I actually do it and I am profitable. It's not profitable all the time. Like I say, this month's been a loser. I've dropped about, I think it's almost £1,000 this month. I've done about £1,000 this month. So giving back some of the profit from the previous 3 months, but still up overall. And I'm expecting September, based on history, to be a profitable month. And then there'll be another losing month at some point before the end of the year, probably. Okay, so that's the numbers. You can see more about the numbers if you go to the website, davidjonestrading.co.uk, click on performance. There's a breakdown of that first period, November to January, with all the trades I did in there. I can't remember how many trades I did, 57 trades, which sounds about right for me, actually, because I normally do perhaps 3 trades a week. So what was that, 13 weeks? That's slightly more, isn't it? So maybe 4 trades a week I was doing back then, but you can see all of the details. And you'll see I was risking back then, I was £100 risk back then, so it was £100 risk, and you see the difference. It's perhaps not too clear on YouTube, but for example, 3rd of November last year, there was an oil trade that made £247, so made 2.5 times the risk. There was an S&P trade down here, which again you won't be able to see, that made £319, so 3.2 times the risk. And it's those sort of trades that make all the difference. The hard thing in trading, we were talking about it a bit on the WhatsApp group this week, is running the big winners, because it's human nature to try and snatch at profits. And what you've got to do, what you've got to try and do, is run it and not give back too much profit, but give it enough room to make some profit. Anyway, so that's the trading course and some numbers from me. I do this WhatsApp group. You used to only be able to join the WhatsApp group if you did the trading course. I changed it a few months ago. You can join the WhatsApp group and try it out if you want to. WhatsApp group will do a daily update, markets I'm watching, trades I'm running, Q&A throughout the day. If anyone's got any questions, they can fire them in. Markets we weren't looking at. If you want to sign up to try it for a month, if you use the code YouTube, you get a 20% discount. So on the website, the links are as usual in the description. If you go to subscribe on the website menu thing, go to the WhatsApp group, and if you put in the code YouTube, use to subscribe. It'll cost you £40 for the month with the code, but you can try it out. I mean, obviously it's not something I'm going to do for free, because it's basically me talking about all the trading stuff I'm looking at in the morning, and trades I'm running and all of that, day in, day out. So I think it's like a more focused version of this weekly thing, market outlook thing, but specifically looking at the markets that I'm interested in, and I think are interesting for today. Euro, US dollar, I thought was the interesting market for today and into next week, and we'll take a look at that in a second. So if you want to join the WhatsApp group, go to the website, sign up, try it for a month, see what you think, blah, blah, blah. There's a snapshot of what it looks like, some blurb from me, and a chart, an interesting chart for the interesting market, I think, for the day. Okay. 5-star Trustpilot reviews as well for the course, which I'm very grateful for. And then finally, I do a free weekly newsletter. I haven't done it for 3 weeks because I'm being a bit lazy. It's going to start again from this weekend. If you go to the homepage, put your email in there on the homepage, subscribe, and you'll get that newsletter that goes out once a week. Okay, that's all the promo stuff done. Right. And there's the website, davidjonestrading.co.uk. Okay, let's get into it. So, I mean, to talk about the trades I've got, I said, it's been a losing month for me this month. The last couple of weeks have been better. My biggest winner, which is still running into September, is the Nasdaq. So I'm long the Nasdaq. I must have talked about it last week on the live stream on Friday. I bought it Friday afternoon. So I think I bought it in about here somewhere, about 5 o'clock on Friday, just below 14.8. The Nasdaq. I thought it was a really sensible trade to do. You know, the market had sold off from July into August. We'd had this, you know, quite a big rally, 800-point rally. It'd been knocked back, but it held above the lows. Blah blah blah. It seemed a logical trade to do, and it's been a really easy trade to be into. It's great when trades go like this because it just goes up and up and up and up. And I've been trailing the stop. So I trailed the stop up behind it. I've been waiting for a dip to see if there's a buying opportunity. There hasn't been a dip. I'm in the trade. If it sells off probably a bit more than it is now, I'll get taken out and come out of that for a profit. So that's one trade I'm in. I'm in the dollar index trade. We'll have a look at this in a bit more detail. Bit scrappy. I'm at break even on that. And I'm in oil trade, which I am really lucky to still be in. Nearly got stopped out on these spikes here. That's been a good trade as well this month, but I'm absolutely... Yeah, I was quite lucky to still be in that trade. So that trade is still running. There's good profit in that trade. Actually, when this Nasdaq and oil trades close out, it'll be a much better month. Because I said I'm down about 1,000 at the moment for the month, but that'll be in August. But that will even things out. It'll still be a losing month, but perhaps not as much. But let's look at these markets. Let's start off with stock markets. What can you say? If we have a look at the big picture, there's the Nasdaq. I mean, it's the same old, isn't it? The trend is up. You know, we saw this big sell-off, and it was a big sell-off relative to other sell-offs we've seen this year. You know, the market peaked at 16,000 in middle of July, sold off to 14.5. So we saw a 1,500-point drop. You know, what's that? 8% drop, something like that. And we've seen it bounce back. So for me, the trend is still up. It's the same old, same old. I want to be a buyer of the dips on the Nasdaq. Let's see what happens. Can it break 16,000? I think if it breaks 16,000, then I'll be looking for a run back to the old all-time highs from November 2021. So for me, you know, it's a buy the dip. You know, it would take weakness through probably 14.2 for me to change my mind about the Nasdaq being bullish. I'm sure I mentioned this last week. You know, that the move that we saw put the 10-day RSI oversold for the first time this year. We'd have to go back to end of December last year to see a 10-day RSI oversold. So blah, 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 all bullish. Let's see what happens today. I think if we get a bit of a flush out this afternoon, a bit of a sell-off, could be interesting, could be a buy a bit later on today. If we start breaking below yesterday's lows, let's see what happens on that. But I'll update the WhatsApp group if anything looks interesting about 5 p.m.-ish today. So that's that, blah, blah, blah. S&P, same old in the S&P. So the trend has been up since October last year. So we're nearly 11 months into that. This old support did really well. You can see it here. The lows from end of June, around 43.29. The market, middle of August, came down to 43.36. And here we are. We've seen the market bounce back again. So again, I mean, this could be interesting. These old highs from March of 2022. There we go. 40. Let's call it 46.40. That might be interesting to see what happens up there. Is that going to be a problem? But all still bullish. Trend is still up. And the DAX, I must admit, I've not looked at the DAX much this week. It's been a bit scrappy. But again, similar setups. Market sells off an important low. In this example, 7th of July. But also from April, around about 15,450 held, and the market's bounced back a bit, not as strongly as some of these US markets, but for me, it would be these old lows I would be watching on the DAX. I'd still be a buyer of the dip on the DAX. FTSE, a little bit dull, a little bit sideways, but again, the big low held on the FTSE. That's going back to 2 Fridays ago. The big lows at 7,200, the lows for the year on the FTSE held. Not too much to say about that. It's a bit too sideways for me, really, the FTSE. So I don't trade the FTSE that much. So that's the FTSE. And the Japanese market. It's interesting this because the Nikkei, you know, had a really good run. The Nikkei, and I would have thought it would have continued that really good run, but it's been a little bit lackluster, hasn't it? We're a bit drifty on the Nikkei. since June. So I don't know. I don't know what I would do there. There's an argument for being a seller. You know, if you wanted to, you could say, well, has that uptrend run out of steam? And we're in a bit of a downtrend now on the Nikkei. So if I was a seller of the Nikkei, you know, at the very least, I would put my stop above whatever that old high was up here, up there. Let's call it 33,500. Let's see what happens. Let's see what happens next week. Does it start to run out of steam up here? So that probably looks the most shortable of these indices at the moment. But again, not that shortable. Let's not forget, it did have a great run from March into June. Let's see what happens with the Nikkei. But we haven't seen a new high for about two and a half months now in the Nikkei. So yeah, so for me, still all about the US stock markets. Oh, these markets are under a bit of pressure. I think it'd be an interesting day today. So I'd quite happily buy the dip though on US stocks when they stop selling off. Let's take a look at the dollar index. So I'm in the trade of the dollar index. It's pretty much break even at the moment. I mean, you could say it is a short up here, the dollar index. You know, we've been pretty sideways for a lot of this year, the dollar index. It did hit a new low for the down move in July. We've run back up. These old levels around 104.70, the highs from May, June. We've started to stall again up there. So I don't know. There are arguments for being long or being short. I was sort of taking the view, even though it's broken out the uptrend, these old lows have held around 103. So are we going to see another push back up to 104.70? And I'd still sit with that. I'm quite happy to stay long, even though it's sort of flip-flopped around for me while I've been in the trade. But interesting to see what happens if we do get another run up. If it starts breaking 103, that low, I think maybe we see it under a lot more pressure next week. So I think that's an interesting one. Now, Euro US dollar. I think I flagged this up in the WhatsApp group today. I think for me this is perhaps one of the more interesting markets to watch for the rest of today and next week. If we go all the way back to September last year, so we've got to go back a year, and we plonk a trend on that looks like that. Okay, so the thing has fallen out of its trend, but as I often say, I'll always give these things one last chance to try and get their trend mojo back. And what's interesting for me is probably the hourly chart since the middle of July. So if we take a look at that, let's get rid of the RSI. So what I was looking at was this downtrend in the euro against the dollar. Looks something like that. And we've had this move this week, sort of Wednesday this week, where we've broken out the downtrend. We've broken some previous resistance, blah, blah, blah. So I was wondering, the sell-off that we saw yesterday, and we saw a bit of stability this morning, is this a buy the dip into the recovery on Euro US dollar? So I think it's an interesting one to watch. You could absolutely take the view, well, listen, this is a false break, and the euro is just going to go ba-boom, go plunging back down again, maybe down to 106.50, the lows from June. I think that's a perfectly valid view. But also, the other view is we have had all this week higher highs, higher lows, all the usual. We've had an uptrend in the euro against the dollar. So, one trade for me, and maybe it's a trade for later on, I don't know, or maybe it's a one to wait till Monday. One trade for me is to be a buyer, take the view this downtrend is reversing, and the euro is going to stage a bit of recovery into September. If I was doing that, then my stop would go below that absolute low, 107.65. I mean, it's an interesting trade. If let's say I put a stop at, I don't know, 107.50, and I'm a buyer now at 108.50. So I've got 100 points risk. Oh, let's do this trade. We haven't done a trade for a while. Let's do the trade. I do have an account with real money for these things. So let's actually do this trade. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take the view, the market's recovering. The euro's turning around slowly. So I'm going to be a buyer. 107.65 is the low. Let's say I'm going to go 107.30. That's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to take the view, we could well see the euro claw its way a little bit higher. So let's do that trade. So euro dollar. Here we go. Right, so Let's just put 1,000 in first of all. What did I say? 1.0730 for the stop. We normally risk $100 or so, don't I? Let's do 15,000. We'll risk $177. There's my risk there. There's my stop. Have I got enough margin? Yes, I've got enough margin. That's it. So I'm going to buy euro US dollar, taking the view, perhaps we'll see more recovery. But if the thing dumps and takes out the low from last Friday, then I'm wrong. That's my view. I think that's an interesting trade going into next week. Let's do it. Okay, let's wait for that to go through. What's going on here now? Oh, there we go. It's done. I don't know why that hung for a bit. All right, so I bought it at 108.45. There it is. There's a few other little trades in there from previous live sessions that are doing all right. Let's see. So I think that's an interesting market next week. There's absolutely the argument for being a buyer or a seller there. I just thought that recovery was quite interesting. Let's see how it turns out. Let's have a look at pound against dollar. Oh, thank you, Richard. Monday is US Labour holiday. Thanks for that. I didn't know that. So it's a holiday in the US on Monday. So it'll be a quiet day on Monday. Pound against the dollar. Similar to the euro, isn't it? We've had this uptrend. It's sort of fallen out. It hasn't really had a decisive move through any big levels. 126. So it's a bit boring, pound against the dollar. So I've not got too much of an opinion on that one at the moment. So that's those. So I do think euro US dollar is an interesting one to watch going into next week. Let's take a look at some other markets. So I'm in this oil trade, flukily still in the trade. It's turned out to be a good trade, so the trading gods were looking after me. It's interesting. It's where is it now? It's new highs for the year as we do this. So new highs for the year for oil. I think it could be an interesting week next week because, you know, for much of this year, it's been like that. It's been pretty boring. It's been stuck in this range. It had a look through the top of the range, early August, sold off. It's come back and bang, we're through the top of the range. So yeah, that's quite that could be, you know, quite the breakout on oil. Let's see. It's only one day, but I would probably still be a buyer of the dip on oil. You know, I'm in the trade at the moment. I'd still be a buyer of the dip. The only question is how far does the dip go? You know, some obvious levels to watch next week. I'd be looking at the Wednesday lows around 81.20, which is $4 below where we are now. But, you know, oil can move, as we know. Let's see. But that's quite bullish, I think, for oil. Perhaps we're seeing it finally ending this range-bound trading, what we have been stuck in for all of this year. Let's see. Let's see where it is Monday, Tuesday next week. But yeah, I'm long at the moment. We'll look at heating oil. I got stopped out of this yesterday. Heating oil. Good trend in heating oil from early July, bang, 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 into the highs in August. I bought the dip. And I had my stop below these old lows. And I wonder if actually a better stop would have been the other side of these lows here. Let's see. Let's wait and see. But I think that's an interesting market, pretty volatile market. I would still be looking to buy the dip on heating oil. I think 294 is the bigger support. Let's see what happens next week. Natural gas. I think I find it a difficult market, natural gas, because it's a bit tricky. I mean, it's a bit volatile as well. Overall, it's still trapped by this 3 level. It cannot get through 3. So it's still a bit range bound, the natural gas price. So even though it does look like absolutely the worst is over since this massive downtrend we had from whenever it was, there we go, it hasn't really managed to break out of this range yet. So I don't know. On the hourlies, we had a gap higher. It's been a weird week. We had a gap higher on Monday. So it's Bank Holiday Monday in the UK this week. Sunday night, Monday morning, opens up here, opens at 266 after closing at 258, and then filled the gap during the day. It's pushed its way back up. I did say in the WhatsApp group I wouldn't trade it, but I'd probably go short with a wide-ish stop. And it's just a bit all over the place, isn't it? I don't know. I mean, you could absolutely argue now that we're in a bit of a recovery, you know, but it's such a volatile nutcase market, isn't it? So, you know, perhaps the purer trade is to be the buyer of the dip, but it's all a bit scrappy for me. And if you go back over the last, what's that, the last 2 months or so, that's what it looks like. We've got just quite wide, rangy market. So not an ideal market for me. So I'm a bit stuck on a fence on that one, to be honest. Gold. Now gold, I mentioned gold last week as a buy the dip market for this week. And I just missed it. But if you look on the hourlies, I was looking at this. When was I looking at it? Here, Tuesday of this week. And I decided to buy it. This is 2 to 3 in the UK. And I was going to buy it at 3 o'clock. And at 3 o'clock, it jumped about $10, bang on 3 o'clock. It just suddenly was trading there, and then bang, it was $10 higher. So I thought, I'll wait till it comes back a bit. And of course, it didn't come back. But, you know, we've seen a really strong move and a good week for gold this week. If we go back to the dailies for a second, let's get this mishmash of lines off. It's still a bit messy, isn't it? I mean, what would you say? You could say, well, the trend is down from here, so I want to be a seller. You could also say, we had a bit of a break below the old support, but it ended up being a false break and the market's rallied. So we're sort of halfway back into the range for the last month, 6 weeks or so. So I'm a bit non-committal now on gold. I would still probably buy a dip because we have had let's clear this stuff off. We have had a trend since whenever, 21st of August. You know, I still buy a dip on gold. But I'd rather buy it below 1930 rather than buy it up here. Let's see. Let's see what happens. So that's gold. Silver, missed the trade on silver this month. But that was good. On the dailies it was, I think. There we go. So we've had this trend in silver since September last year. Bang, 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 bang. Came down to it, middle of August. Lovely little setup. Holds above the old lows, around $22. And bang, here we are, having been to $25. Sorry, excuse me. So I don't think I'd buy it up here. I'd buy the dip. I'm not too excited in it up at these levels for me. So, but that trend for the last year is very much still going on silver. And other stuff, Bitcoin. Bitcoin had that news out this week that was bullish, wasn't it? I got a load of emails from newsletters saying, oh my God, this has completely changed things for Bitcoin. And what's happened? It's gone all the way back to where it was before the news came out. Was it an SEC ruling or something, wasn't it? I can't remember. Oh, the latest news is SEC delays Bitcoin ETF decision for all applicants, including BlackRock, has now announced delays for all new. So that's the reason it's been clobbered. Delayed until October, making a decision on the spot Bitcoin ETF. Okay. I wonder why. It doesn't seem, I don't see why you wouldn't have a spot ETF. Anyway, whatever. I still buy the dip on Bitcoin. The trend is still just about up. We've still got big support at 24/7. I don't think it's going to be troubling 60,000, 70,000 anytime soon. But I think it's interesting down here, down at the lows from middle of June. It's quite interesting. We have seen it hold before this news kicked off during August. We've seen it hold at these levels. So I think it's pretty interesting. And that's that. Is there anything else interesting? Cocoa. That's been. I missed it again. I can't believe. I keep missing this thing in cocoa. I'm spending too much time focusing on short-term stuff and not enough time on the medium-term stuff. Great trend in cocoa since September last year. New highs for the trend over the last few days. Lovely little move up going on in cocoa. Wheat. I've been short wheat for a long time. And it's interesting here. There's absolutely an argument for being a buyer of wheat because we're down to this big level. You could almost say that's the textbook trend coming to an end thing. I'm still short, but the market's been trending lower, but so far continues to hold above these late May lows. So I think that's an interesting market for September, the price of wheat. So let's see what happens. So going into next week, what's interesting? Stock markets. I always watch US stock markets, see what happens with those. I normally have at least a trade on couple of trades a month on the NASDAQ or the S&P. So I think that's an interesting market for next week. The other interesting market, for the reasons I went through, is that euro dollar. Is the downtrend, the big downtrend since mid-July, so 6 weeks, going to continue? And ba-bang, down we go. Or is this little recovery going to take over? Who knows? But I think that's an interesting market to watch. And finally, oil, because we are on new highs for the year on oil. So what's happening with the oil price? Let's see. But I would be absolutely a buyer of dip. So that's quite a good mix of markets to watch next week. NASDAQ/S&P, Euro, US dollar, currency pair, and oil, energy commodity. So 3 very different markets. But I think well worthy of keeping an eye on next week. Let's see what happens. Right, well, I'll have a look at the stuff you want looking at now. But again, just a quick reminder, if you want to join the WhatsApp group, daily update from me of markets I'm watching, trades I'm running, Q&A, all of that stuff, go to the website and sign up using the code YouTube for a 20% discount off the first month. And the website is davidjonestrading.co.uk. All the details are in the description to this video. Right, let's have a look at anything you want looking at. Let's go back. Gold still holding up. Yeah, we did that, didn't we? Gold, what has it done today on these payrolls, though? Let's have a look. Looks like it's come off a little bit, hasn't it? But yeah, a bit of volatility. But like I say, nice trend on gold over the last couple of weeks or so. So, yeah. What do you think of SQ? SQ, what is SQ? Block, okay. What do I think of them? Let's have a look. I think it's a trading buy, isn't it? I would say. It's been sideways for, 11 months now. Big old range from 51 to 90. It's massive swings, isn't it? But yeah, if you wanted to buy it, or if someone wanted to buy it, it's an interesting buy down here because it's knocked down to the bottom of the range. So I'd have my stop the other side of $50. So it'd be like a $9 stop. But if it pushes its way back up to the top of the range, there's like $25 potential upside, isn't there? So I think it's interesting. I normally pick the more trendy trend ones. I do trade stocks. I traded one this week that's doing all right. Copart. So I bought those at some point this week. And they've done all right. My biggest winner at the moment is Google. So I'm in the Google trade from the middle of July, I think. No, middle of June. So I normally look for ones that are trending. But that SQ is interesting from a rangy point of view because it's been knocked to the bottom of the range, isn't it? TLRY, the dope stocks. So the old marijuana stocks in the US. Let's have a look at those. I've never traded any of these. I do remember going back to the old days when they were going absolutely nuts, weren't they? Look at that. $300 and they're at $3. Put that in your pipe and smoke it. Yeah, nuts. What would you do? Would you buy it? I would. It's gone a bit crazy, isn't it? It's doubled in the last month. It's interesting. It's too volatile a stock for me. It's moved 50% in the last week, almost, or 80%, whatever it is. Not 80, 40%. So it's interesting for a longer term investment. It's not one I would trade, but perhaps we are finally seeing the end of this weakness. I'd wait and see. Do we get a bit of a sell off and a retest? I don't know. But yeah, crazy one. RMD, ResMed. What do they do? Health technology. That's not one for me. I would have maybe had a little go here, and then it's just dumped again, isn't it? So it wouldn't be one for me because we're breaking so many levels. Looks really weak. If you were going to go short, where would your stop go? If you're going to go short ResMed, my stop would be the absolute tightest. I'd ideally like to have it about 190. The tightest I'd go would probably be 175. It's broken, I'm guessing that's earnings, isn't it? So we gapped lower on earnings, which is always interesting because sometimes the market can overreact. So I could have been tempted to be a buyer, but it's just followed through on the weakness, isn't it? So that looks pretty weak. It was, it had sort of run out of steam. since November 21, hadn't it? It hadn't really done much, and it's just got a bit clobber-armoured, hadn't it? American Airlines, is it a buy? American Airlines. Let's have a look. American Airlines Group. I mean, we've obviously looked at this before because there's some lines on it. You could do, couldn't you? It's quite interesting, that, isn't it? Well, it's interesting to me anyway. We had a downtrend. Looks like it broke, and I would treat that as a break. So for me, that's a big sell-off, but I would take the view that it is sort of trying to recover. We're still in this trend over the last year. It is now, isn't it? So if I was a buyer, I'd try and be a bit patient. I've been a bit impatient in August, to be honest. So I'd try and be a bit more patient, and wait for signs of a base. It was only last Friday that it hit a new low for this down move. But I think it's interesting if it, we've got this lots of support from $12.50 to $13.50. So I would be looking to buy the dip on American. Interesting one, that. Bitcoin is going to get crushed. Wheat, apparently there have been issues with crops in Canada and Europe. The Italians are worried about prices for pasta because of wheat prices. Okay, fair enough. IWM is the Russell, isn't it? Isn't it the Russell 2000 index? Yeah, it's just a bit, I do watch this. It's just a bit sideways. I mean, I'd much rather trade the NASDAQ or the S&P because the Russell has been sideways for a year. I'm sure, from a trading point of view, if you flip it over to an hourly, there are opportunities in there, but on the dailies, it just looks a little bit sideways to me. What's the NASDAQ doing now? Let's have a quick look. It's just faffing around, isn't it? FMG, Fortescue Metals Group. FMG, Fortescue Metals on the Australian Stock Exchange. Let's have a look. It looks a bit boring to me, I'd have to say. We've gone in over the last 2.5 years. We've had 2.5 years of a rangy market. You could say it's a trading buy. So on the top side, $26 is the top, $14 is the bottom. As a trading buy, maybe it's been knocked a lot today, hasn't it? It's lost a dollar, an Aussie dollar today. So trading buy, you could say, perhaps when the weakness stops, be a buyer and put a stop. I would put a stop the other side of 19. But it's not one for me because it hasn't been trending. So, but yeah, if that's the sort of thing, then maybe we've seen an overreaction to what I'm guessing at earnings or news or something like that. Fortescue's, that's a little bit concerning, isn't it? So the chief financial officer has exited just days after the chief exec has exited, apparently. Well, I'm surprised it didn't sell off even more than that. The chief financial officer of Fortescue has departed just days after blah, 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 blah. Fiona Hicks. She'd only been in the role since February, the old CEO. I love a bit of corporate scandal. What's going on here then? Not that there is a scandal, obviously. There we go. Well, interesting. I'm surprised it didn't get hit harder than that, but there we go. That's that. So that's Fortescue Metals. Let's see what happens next week. See if it calms down a bit after all that news this week. Air Canada reported a huge quarter a couple of weeks ago. Let's have a look at that. Air Canada. Nice trend, isn't it? Been a nice trend in that since July last year. I would be a buy the dip of Air Canada. If I was a buyer today, I'd probably want my stop the other side of 21, I reckon. 21 Canadian dollars. Let's see. And that's it. I think we're done. There's no more questions. I think it seems a bit quiet at the moment. I think a lot of people are still on holiday. No more questions. But like I say, next week, NASDAQ, S&P, blah, blah, blah. Do we get the sell-off and a buy? Oh, already it's turning around. Let's see what happens today. Euro, US dollar, did that trade. Currently a bit underwater on that trade. How much am I underwater? $13. Let's see what happens. I think that's a really interesting chart for next week. See what happens there. And this oil. Still going oil because we're at highs for the year on oil. Let's see what happens there. Okay, so that's it. We'll wrap it up there. Don't forget, if you want more of this and every day, you should join the WhatsApp group. go to the website, davidjonestrading.co.uk, click on subscribe, use the YouTube thing, code YouTube. I'm going to do more videos from next week. I've been a bit lazy, to be honest, in July and August. So I'm going to pull my finger out in September and do more stuff during the week. So, yeah, that's it. Otherwise, see you next Friday. Do it all again next Friday. Thanks to Richard for saying it's Labor Day in the US on Monday, so that could be a boring day. But back to normal after that. So until then, good luck with your trading and enjoy the weekend.